Competence-based extension. The universal language of images, which we have used to represent action types, allows us to connect verbs from any language to their appropriate action without passing through verbal definitions of the action concepts. The scenes in IMAGACT are very explicit and leave little space for ambiguity. For instance, a Spanish informant can easily decide which verb or verbs of his language can be used for each action. The relation between Spanish verbs and the verbs of the other languages in IMAGACT is therefore obtained without passing through a translation process, since it is the direct consequence of mapping Spanish verbs onto the set of scenes in the database. We have created an infrastructure with a clear user interface called IMAGACT for All that has already been successfully used to incorporate Spanish and Chinese into IMAGACT. The following sections present the implementation procedure for mapping any language onto the IMAGACT ontology using this interface. Logging into IMAGACT and accessing the Competence-Based Extension interface. The work of Competence-Based Extension of IMAGACT to a new language is performed by native speaker informants. These informants receive a username and password that authorize them to process data for their language only. The informant will log in and will have access to the part of the IMAGACT infrastructure which is dedicated to competence-based extension. In principle, any browser should be compatible with the infrastructure, but we strongly advise the use of Firefox or Chrome, which have been thoroughly tested. In addition, the latest version of Flash should be installed. We are now accessing as a Spanish or Chinese informant. After logging in, the informant will choose the Scene Metadata menu. The informant will be redirected to the Competence-Based Extension Interface, or CBE interface, which represents the IDs and thumbnail images of all the scenes, each identifying one separate action concept in the ontology. 10 scenes are listed on each page. On the right side of each scene, the informant will see the English and Italian verbs mapped onto that scene in the corpus-based annotation. Moreover, he will see the processing status of each scene in all languages that have been opened for processing IMAGACT concepts in IMAGACT for All. In order to start processing, the informant will click on the ID and access the full set of metadata for that concept. The informant cannot modify the information on this page that concerns other languages. Only the lines corresponding to his language can be edited. The language for each line is identified by a flag. The first necessary operation is to properly appreciate the action represented in the video. The informant will play the video by clicking on it and will observe the represented action. It is clearer and more informative to play it full screen. Once he understands the referred action, the informant will provide the verb or verbs in his language that can be used to refer to that specific action. The lemma should be annotated in its infinitival form, as it is commonly reported in dictionaries. The informant will annotate this lemma or lemmas in the box corresponding to his language on the bottom of the page. As an example, this is the lemma chosen by the Spanish informant for this action. For each lemma, he will then write in the caption box a simple sentence in the present tense filling all the arguments of the verb that properly describe the action. This sentence will be used as the caption of the scene in the language of the informant. Both the verb and the caption must be written in the current writing system of the language of the informant. If this system does not use Roman characters, after the annotation in the current writing system, the informant will also provide the verb and its caption in Roman characters. He or she will write it in the respective transliteration boxes, as in this Chinese example. Saving and editing the work. For each scene, once the work on verbs and captions is completed, the informant ticks the box corresponding to Work Done. To return to the list of scenes to be processed, the informant then clicks on the link Save and Back to List. The box and link are located on the left side of the screen. The infrastructure does not allow any editing of verbal lemmas, captions, or transliterations after a new line is inserted or the work is saved. If the informant needs to modify something, or she changes her judgment on the applicability of the verb, she must delete the entire line, using the red X on the right. She may then write it again in the correct manner if needed. For instance, in the figure shown, the applicability of the last verb is highly doubtful in Spanish, and moreover, a typing error occurred. Poner instead of poner. Therefore, the informant will delete the line by clicking on the X. If she wants, she can write it again in a corrected manner on a new line. She will then save and go back to the list of scenes. Continuing the work. After clicking Save and Back to List, the infrastructure will take the informant to the first page of the list. To continue working, the annotator will ask the infrastructure to give him the scenes which remain to be processed. The easiest way to do this is to select the language and then click on the search button. For instance, when the box for Chinese is ticked, the infrastructure will immediately return the scenes that are still to be processed for this language. Sharing the work. There may be more than one annotator at a time working on one language. However, the infrastructure does not allow, at least in this release, collaborative work or evaluation for consensus on the possible verb assignments by different annotators. In IMAGACT, we foresee that the work on one language will be under the responsibility of one supervisor, who will revise the choices once the annotation has been completed by one or more native speaker informants. The supervisor can track his revisions on one Excel file for scientific purposes. The work on one language is made accessible on the IMAGACT query interface once the supervisor gives his OK. The supervisor can assign parts of the work to different informants. In this case, after an informant logs in, only the pages assigned to him will be shown. A supervisor of informants in a particular language is called a Super CBE. Users with a Super CBE role will be able to assign for processing a set of videos in IMAGACT to their informants. The procedure is as follows. CBE Lite in the navigation bar lists all the scenes in IMAGACT. Every video has a selection box on its left. A drop-down menu lists all CBE informants for the Super CBE's language. After selecting videos, the Super CBE selects the CBE user and clicks on the Apply button. The Super CBE can select pages after pages. CBE users will see and process only videos assigned to them.